Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I welcome you all in this lecture. Today we are going to study about the cohort studies. Now, what a cohort study looks like and what a cohort study is formulated of is basically it's an observational study where a cohort selected retains three following characteristics. Number one, the information about the subject containing any particular character. Now I have written a word particular character over here. It is basically an association of an exposure. Let me change the color so that we can be more the color should be more evident to you. So it's basically an association of exposure and towards an outcome. All right, since we are talking about the cohort study from a biological perspective, so it is basically any risk factor association with a disease. So the things which should we need to remember is the observational study, information about a subject containing any particular character like a blood group, and then we want to study which type of blood group has more incidence of cardiovascular disease, something like that. So the incidence of a disease in exposed individuals in contrast to the individuals which are not exposed to in that particular event. All right, and the population is followed for a certain period of time. So these are the three things we need to know. Now, how a cohort study is different from a randomized clinical trial. In randomized clinical trial, as you know, you have a control, or any investigator or somebody has a control to allocate certain number of individuals or patients towards placebo or any other alternate treatment plan. While over here in cohort study, you don't have any control. You are observing it and you are just reproducing the findings of your observation. So cohort study is an observational study, and the investigator has no control on the allocation of individuals exposed and not exposed. All right, let me elaborate it with one example. Let's say a cohort study of 22,000 Chinese men were studied, and their exposure was like how many of these individuals were standing positive for hepatitis B surface antigen. So this is the element of interest we need to know right at the beginning of a study. All right, and we want to know how many of them develop an outcome of hepatocellular carcinoma. So let's say out of these 22,000 individuals, I'm just rounding off the data, we want to study, and these 22,000 individuals were screened for hepatitis B surface antigen, HBsAg. Now some of them will be containing that surface antigen and some of them lack that surface antigen, right? So we just mention it as minus. Now over a period of time, let's say over here it says that 3.3 years, so 3.3 years. So after, let's say the study starts at 2001, and so 2001, 2002, 2003. So after 2003, or in midway of 2003, these individuals, let's say the number of individuals present over here are 15,000. I'm just rounding it off and making up the data more easier for you to understand. And let's say there are 7,000 individuals who are who doesn't contain hepatitis B surface antigen present in them. So we say that there are certain number of individuals who develop HCC, hepatocellular carcinoma, while some of them remain normal. So, and similarly, the individuals in year 2000 from the same study 2001, 7,000 remain disease free, and out of them several number of individuals remain normal, while some of them do develop hepatocellular carcinoma or a liver cancer. All right, let's assume there is some number over here. Let's say 5,000 number individuals have suffered from liver cancer in the individuals who lack any hepatitis B surface antigen. And over here we say that out of 15,000 individuals, let's say 14,000 individuals stand affected with liver cancer, while the normal individuals remain 1,000. So this whole group is called exposed group, as we have discussed in the last slide, and this is called not exposed group. Okay, so this is how the study design works. So a cohort of 22,000 Chinese men in Taiwan were set up to investigate the association of this exposure with hepatocellular carcinoma outcome, and the government has followed these individuals for 3.3 years, and after following these 3.3 years, government is going to declare that whether this exposure has any effect on the outcome of that disease, whether all the hepatocellular carcinoma patients increased risk is being associated with hepatitis B surface antigen presence or not. This type of study is called as cohort study. Now, there are two types of cohort studies. Number one is the prospective study, and the prospective study says concurrent or cohort study, and the alternate name is longitudinal study. The second name is retrospective study or historical cohort study or non-concurrent study. So let's say, let me give you an example of prospective study, and then we just change the numbers so you will get a more clear understanding about it. So in case of a concurrent cohort study or a prospective study, let's assume we are following a number of school kids who are enrolled in a school in year 2012. We observe their smoking habits. We are not influencing them that don't smoke or do smoke. And we follow them for 10 years. After that 10 years, we divide those kids into two halves. One of them smokers, and one of them are attributed as non-smokers. So we say smokers, they are the exposed group, all right, and then we say non-smokers, and these non-smokers are declared as not exposed groups. Now the smokers will be having, we assume that lung cancer case initiates and the latency period of this lung cancer is roughly around 10 years. So we say that after 10 years there are a number of individuals who get exposed and develop lung cancer, and then we say this is called disease. These are the individuals who develop a disease, and these are the individuals who don't develop a disease. All right. Similarly, in these individuals, there is a certain number of people who doesn't smoke but do suffer from lung cancer, and then there is another alternate group where there is who don't smoke and live a healthy life, so there is no disease. So based on this, we develop an association that smoking, whether the smoking has any effect on lung cancer. So this kind of study, when is done from 2012 to 2032, this is called prospective study. And if we just change the number from 2000 to, let's say, 1912 to 1922 to, let's say, it's a backlog record of different events happen in the previous century, that is called as retrospective study. All right, so pretty straightforward. Now, another interesting thing we should learn is what are the benefits of this cohort study. There are few interesting findings. Number one, you will find out in the literature is that the association of tobacco chewing and smoking habits were being assessed, whether these tobacco chewing and smoking habit could influence the overall mortality of individuals. And then we want to study what is the harmful effect of this tobacco chewing, which is also called as naswar, and smoking habits affect the overall mortality. Is there any effect? So the individuals of roughly around 10,000 individuals in a district, South India, was followed up for 10 years, and their habits were being distributed as similarly as we have mentioned earlier: exposed, not exposed, diseased, not diseased, diseased, and not diseased. All right. So same trend was being used, and then we established that the tobacco chewing may have an effect on overall mortality. This is how a study design works. So the nature of a specific hypothesis and on its practical constraints are the two core parameters we need to define. Now, here you can see a very interesting word, Farmingham study. Now, this study was initially initiated in 1948, and in 1948, the objective of this study was uh, to assess the association of different factors like association of different exposure factors, obesity, and what you can say different other factor paradigms were also being assessed, and I'm going to elaborate in the subsequent section. But these factors include cholesterol intake, tobacco chewing, and then we were trying to study whether there is an association with coronary heart disease. The area selected was Birmingham because it contains a roughly 30,000 individuals, and these 30,000 individual town was easy to manipulate and to respond to the survey. So the study began in 1948. The volunteers enrolled in this study were 5,000, roughly 5,000 adults, and then their what you can say lifestyle or their lifestyle pattern was being assessed over a course of not only 1 or 2 years, but over a course of decades. And then the study includes their obesity, cholesterol, exercise. So there are multiple exposure and risk factors which were being studied with the coronary heart disease. And based on the findings, the study has been extended even to the fourth generation. So that means the study is still ongoing in different dynamics on the same number of individuals and their progeny, I mean the siblings, not only the kids, to study whether the obesity has any effect on coronary heart disease. So the factors which they came to know is that the incidence of chronic heart disease, coronary heart disease, increase with the age. So they initially enrolled, let's say the age group window they have selected in 1948 was 30 years to 30 years to 62 years of age. So they enrolled male and female individuals lying between 30 to 62 years of age, with the reason that the incidence of coronary heart is low among less than individuals less than 30 years of age, and the people who are suffering from coronary heart disease above 62 years is already been influenced by certain other parameters, and they may not be followed for the subsequent decades. So this is their window, all right, in 1948. So after 30 years they have observed certain parameters and they established very key points. The incidence of coronary heart disease increase with the age, and the person with hypertension develops coronary heart disease greater risk hypertension. And then they say that tobacco smoking and habitual use of alcohol increase the risk. So they have studied different dynamics using the cohort based model, all right. Next, but this is a very, what you can say, this is a very study in which you have multiple exposures, you can came across different diseases. But what if the exposure is a rare event? For example, god forbid, there is a very rare incidence of ionized radiations exposure. So how we are going to study that rare event? In that case, the general population will be an exhaustive target. We don't see the whole to screen whole Japanese population. So in that case, the example, excellent example, is being presented mostly about the Hiroshima Nagasaki residents. Now, the lifespan study is ongoing cohort study, which was set to investigate the long-term health effects of exposure of high level of ionized radiations. I'm going to excuse ionized radiation exposure among the survivors. Now, this is the outcome, and we want to study what is the association of these ionized radiations with different diseases. So, the study includes two interesting parameters. Number one, acute and chronic diseases can also be delineated by using the same objective of ionized radiation. So, the exposed group we already have, and we are comparing it with different diseases. All right, and then this is like if the exposure is rare event, you can rely on that event and then collect information that the exposure of Hiroshima and Nagasaki residents leukemia chances are high or skin cancer is more. This is how you design a study cohort. Now the choice for comparison group, I mean if their event is a rare event, if the event you are comparing is Hiroshima Nagasaki atomic bomb residents, how you are going to compare them with someone who is not exposed to that event. In that case, there are two tricks we are going to learn. The selection is mostly a critical aspect. Unexposed group should be as similar as possible to the exposed group. Remember the example of school kids? The ones who smoke is our exposed group. The other who doesn't smoke is our unexposed group. So that is called as internal control. Now, that is an example of internal control. But sometimes you don't have an internal control and you rely on external controls. Let me elaborate with this example. Over here, its study says that in among US females, the study was designed to assess whether the use of oral contraceptives has any association with breast cancer. The study objective was different. It was basically designed to study whether the effect of fat intake has any association with breast cancer. But based on so many questions, this additional risk factors was also being enrolled. All right. Now, it was studied among those individuals, and the study design was followed up for 10 years. So the study begins in 1976 till 1986. So the female or the woman who declared that she doesn't use oral contraceptives for the whole duration of 10 years. This one is called as not exposed or unexposed group. Okay, so this is a sort of internal unexposed group comparative analysis. The other example in which you can learn these details is that, for example, in Britain, there was a nuclear power plant, and there are a certain group of individuals who are working directly with the radiations. So these individuals were compared with those people who are working on the same power plant but are not working in that area. It's like you are working in a hospital but you are not exposed to X-ray. So not exposed, exposed individuals. So this comparison was being assessed, that radiation versus not radiation could be used. All right. So this is also an example of internal control. And now what we are presenting is external group example. In the external group example, it says, let's suppose that we are interested to know, based on a certain industry, whether the risk of individuals dying in one industry is more as compared to another. The people who are working in, let's say, dyeing industry, the workers working in dyeing industry are more frequently dying of lung cancer as compared to the persons who are working in Collins, or what you can say in a construction industry. All right. So in that case, a comparison is always an external group, and a cohort of workers working, let's say, based on age-specific mortality, we say that among 45 to 54 individuals, the person's death was 850 individuals of rubber worker cohort died. Steel workers' death was 907. Ohio State overall mortality says 940 individuals died. So, based on this assessment, we say that maybe the rubber workers' death rate is much less at relatively early 40s or 50s years of age. But when we compare rubber workers' cohort data of late 50s or late 60s with the steelworker cohort data, we say that the number of individuals who worked in the industry of rubber workers, old age individuals, they die more frequently, their number is more high in rubber worker industry as compared to steel workers. Alright? Now, any one of you, if you are attending this video wisely, you can point out that the Ohio State worker death mortality is pretty much high in both these incidences, 940 and 2365. That means this is something odd, but this is not the case. The data over here is already including health worker effect. The individuals who are healthy are being enrolled over here. So the data is pretty much what you can say biased in this aspect, all right? But it is providing us a useful information that which industry is more safe in terms of labor and aspects to cover, all right? So this is how an external group comparison between exposed and not exposed is evaluated. So the biasness in a cohort is a limitation for a cohort study. So in order to avoid that, we need to count all those confounding factors, confounding variables. Now, let's say we are working on asbestos exposure versus respiratory disease data on workers. So we are comparing whether the asbestos exposure increased the risk of respiratory diseases to the workers who are working in that particular industry. The confounding factor, which could be an attributory factor, would be smoking, and it should not be avoided. So, lack of history of smoking data may adversely affect our understanding between exposure and outcome. Okay, and I am repeating it. This is an observational study. You can't differentiate the workers that they are good ones. They are limitedly. Uh, so we need additional parameter right at the start of the study. So the measurement of outcome. Now, the measurement of outcome that is important. Sources of cancer may be included. Source from cancer may be included is like cancer registry database or self-administered questionnaires we use. And the caution is the cohort study is focused on disease development. Now, the disease development is a relative term. Disease development means that the clinically evitable sign may be pronounced, and you can say that this patient has been suffering from any particular disease, as COVID yes or COVID no. Okay, once it is being screened. So, evitable signs are the indications of measurement of outcome. So, the people may follow up a study right at the start of a study, for example, which I have mentioned in earlier examples, or they may join the study at certain time points and leave the study group. All right. So the duration of the study feedback may vary, and follow-up contact compromise based on telephone, mail questionnaires, or home visits. So cohort study is pretty expensive because you need to follow this individual for roughly around 10, 20 years. And this is a quick summary that risk in exposed group, that is over here exposed group A divided by A plus C, this is the risk in exposed group, and risk is unexposed group, that is B divided by B plus D. Now B plus D is all those individuals who are not exposed, and B is the number of individuals who may suffer from, let's say over here if I write lung cancer. Now these individuals have a lung cancer, this individual also have a lung cancer. They may not be smoking, as a risk factor over here. They are not smokers, they do smoke. So A divided by A plus C. So A means the individuals who smoke, all of them A plus C are smokers, but some of them who develop cancer is the lung cancer. A divided by the number of individuals who smoke, total number of individuals. Over here, non-smokers, so the number of individuals who have lung cancer but non-smokers divided by total non-smokers. This is how we calculate risk in unexposed group. So the risk ratio is being assessed over here. If the risk ratio is 1.18, you can understand there is an association or not. So based on this, you presume that this is an incidence which is we need to report or not. Sometimes, as I have mentioned earlier, the study group individuals join the study at different time intervals. In that case, you go for person's year time, how long the individuals stay in that study. All right. So in that case, you are estimating the rate instead of risk. Okay, that's the pretty much straightforward difference. Thank you very much for your time and attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.